Welcome everyone to RMIT and Eurecat Global Webinar on Transformation of Healthcare Industry 4.0. Together with Eurecat, it's a real pleasure to be hosting this digital event. My name is Marta Fernandez. I'm the Executive Director at RMIT Europe, the university's hub in Barcelona. RMIT is a global university, but we are proud to have been founded on the land of the Wurundjeri people and the Kulin nations, the Aboriginal traditional owners of Melbourne. And whenever we meet in Melbourne, we say welcome in the Wurundjeri language and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and their elders past and present. So in that spirit, Wominjeka, welcome. At today's event, we will be covering how in healthcare, Industry 4.0 has driven innovation that aims to improve the quality and efficiency of the industry from manufacturing to medical practice. The fourth industrial revolution has disrupted the way production plants work by integrating smart technologies and cyber-physical systems in the manufacturing process. According to the World Economic Forum, healthcare is one of the sectors that will benefit most from new Industry 4.0 technologies, particularly artificial intelligence and robotics. This is leading to rapid transformation of the healthcare sectors, redefining how healthcare is delivered and understood. So this global webinar will examine the impact that Industry 4.0 is having on the life sciences and healthcare sectors with a particular focus on artificial intelligence. Leading academics and industry practitioners will be sharing their insights on the latest technologies and developments, as well as the critical skills needed in the field. And now I would like to introduce Professor Karin Verspoor, Executive Dean of RMIT's School of Computing Technologies. Her work primarily focuses on the use of artificial intelligence methods to enable biological discovery and clinical decision support through extraction of information from clinical texts and biomedical literature, and also using machine learning-based modeling. Karin has a varied career history spanning technology startups, national laboratories, and academia. Karin will be facilitating the webinar today. Over to you, Karin.
Thank you so much, Marta. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the talks that we'll be hearing today, covering a whole range of topics related to our theme of the transformation of healthcare. And I think the key point we're trying to get across is that it's a really exciting time to be working in the intersection between technology and healthcare. It's a time of really rapid change, and we're seeing some amazing things coming out of our industry and research sectors, some of which we'll hear about today. Some of the key changes that I'm seeing in the relationships that I have to do with how we use data. We are collecting more and more data these days in relation to our health. The obvious places that we're doing that include electronic health records, and the digital health applications that are being used to report data from patients, including things like Fitbits and the cardiac monitors and sleep devices. All of these things are collecting huge amounts of data through sensors and through direct entry of information. And we're really starting to think about how we can best take advantage of that data to change the way we treat patients and the way we make decisions in relation to their care. Clinical research is also changing. We're seeing a lot of systemization in the design of clinical trials and support for registration and analysis of those clinical trials, and we can share the information from those trials much more rapidly now, which contributes to a really synergistic relationship between data and knowledge. We're improving the way we recruit people into clinical trials by leveraging technology, and we're doing a better job of managing the results of those trials and the data that's collected in those trials. All of which is to say we're having an acceleration in how we capture clinical evidence and biomedical knowledge, which is in turn facilitating a lot of progress in our understanding of disease and management of disease. Next slide, please. How are we doing this? We're doing this through those Industry 4.0 technologies, leveraging automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. These tools are allowing us to explore data at scale to find predictive patterns that can eventually help us to support clinical decisions by asking things like, what happens to patients which have this particular profile? Do we see that when we treat a collection of patients with a particular drug, do they have a positive outcome or a negative outcome? And we can generate hypotheses about what the factors are that are contributing to particular patient responses by leveraging these large collections of data that we're starting to have available to us. We're integrating data from multiple modalities, so we're using image information, proteomic, genomic information, routine clinical data, and a lot of the data that I work on is unstructured data that's collected in the course of healthcare. How do we make use of all of this data? Well, increasingly we're using sophisticated algorithms that allow us to bring together these very different types of information in order to guide our insights into the data. We also have robot scientists, so I think we'll be hearing a little bit more about this sort of automation and robotics in some of our later talks. But we can explore we can use robots to actually run experiments and help us to rapidly test particular hypotheses that we have. There's some fantastic examples of having an idea for what kind of drug might treat a particular disease, running it through a large high throughput experiment using robots, and then very quickly translating it into the lab and into use in humans. We probably saw this with COVID and how quickly our vaccines were created in that context. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing is a shift from the standard paradigm in medicine of population level analysis, where we do statistical analysis across patients that have been very carefully selected into randomized controlled trials, into models of real people using the data that's collected in the routine course of care. This is allowing us, through the large-scale data sets and the algorithms that explore those data sets, to really characterize populations and patients at a much higher resolution in order to discriminate responders to a drug from non-responders, severe and mild disease, trying to predict who might develop a very negative, severe outcome from a disease and who is going to just be okay with it, just like we've seen in COVID. We can do targeted selection of treatments for people based on their very specific individual profiles, and targeted development of therapies for particular groups of people. All of this is really about precision, moving from that kind of large-scale statistical summaries of data to much more specific patterns in individual profiles. Next slide, please. Ultimately, what we're moving towards is something that you might call the global learning healthcare system, a system where we have a virtuous circle between collection of data, analysis of that data, conversion of the analysis into knowledge, and then use of that knowledge in the ongoing care of patients, which then becomes more data that we can learn from. And so we can see this synergistic relationship between collection of data, storage of data, analysis of data, and transformation of that data into information that's used to guide clinical decisions. It's a really exciting time to be working with all of this technology and really seeing it come into to bear on very, very complex clinical decision making. And I'm really excited about all of the opportunities ahead of us. So I will now move and introduce our next speaker, We're going to hear from Dr. Philippe Miraes, who leads the Digital Health Unit at Eurecat, the Technology Center of Catalonia. His team specializes in service-oriented architectures, mobility, Internet of Things, big data analytics, machine learning, and assistive technologies to design, build, and deploy innovative products and services for personalized, preventive, predictive, and participatory healthcare. Philippe has led several ICT projects, both in the public sector and the private sectors. Over to you, Philippe.
Thanks, Karin. Thanks, everybody. And good morning from Barcelona. I'm very excited to be here and also to consolidate this relationship with RMIT from Eurecat. That's really exciting. I will talk about this transformation of healthcare with digitalization and multidisciplinary technologies that we are using. So in the next slide, you will see how we organize our research in these three lines: integrated care, data analytics in medicine, and biomechanics. This is a multidisciplinary research that involves knowledge of other units in Eurecat, like robotics, medical devices, biotechnologies, including omics sciences, and nutrition and health, sustainability, and others, to build new solutions, new products in all these lines that you're reading in our expertise. I will present our vision of it in the next slide. Mainly, well, the main actor of our research and innovation is the patient and the caregiver, of course, with the support of professionals. So we are targeting end users, especially citizens and patients, but also carers, healthcare professionals, and the administration and decision makers. We build from data sources, including clinical, biological, image, and environmental data sources, based on a preventive vision, working in the 4 pillars of healthy living, namely physical activity in sports, nutrition, sleep, and psychosocial aspects, to build new solutions, new products and services for a 4P medicine: preventive, predictive, personalized, participatory. Let's not forget the 5P, precision medicine, and especially the idea of value-based medicine, where we bring our expertise and our research. So in next slides, you will see how we have been working this for already 15 years. Now, after the pandemic, everybody, you can ask anybody in the street, and everybody understands about the importance of that. But this has been a long work already. We work in a way in which we bring all our use cases to a general purpose environment framework that we call X-Care. This is a microservices platform that involves all the different services that, like Lego pieces, are used to build new solutions, including data analysis pipelines to build new integrated care solutions and new medical devices. I will present in next slide some of the examples, use cases that we have been working. Especially, I'll start with Conecare, a very important 4 years European project that we were leading. Finished last year. Our target user was the complex chronic patient, and we deployed advanced ICT solutions in 4 European sites, and we collected and published evidence about the benefits in health status, health results, but also acceptation of technology and cost efficiency gains. From there, in next slide, we'll see that we transfer this into new approaches that we are already deploying in real clinical practice and in the market. This is one of them, Prehab, and this is a solution for preparing patients towards a major surgical procedure, and we train those patients in a tri-modal program, including promotion of physical activity, nutritional balance, and psychological support. And we have demonstrated how this improves the results after surgery and reduces complications. Another example in next slide is the 6-minute walk test. This is a spin-off that we are launching now, where we are transferring technology to the functional assessment of people with mobility problems. For example, we have clinically validated that with children with Duchenne disease, but also with elderly people with other neuromuscular diseases, to objectively assess function beyond functional tests like the 6-minute walk test. Another example in the next slide is the CKD Sense. This is a point-of-care medical device supported by data analytics, artificial intelligence, to provide diagnosis and prognosis tools for kidney chronic diseases. Another example in next slide is deep lung. Here we have built a decision support system for the early detection and characterization of nodules in a lung, and be able to detect, re-identify, quantify growth, and predict malignancy of tumors that are gathered in 3D CT scans in a longitudinal way, and we are providing precision medicine to characterize and support the radiologist and the oncologist. Next slide, we'll see a final example, another example, in this case of COVID. We have built an advanced model based on epidemiological mobility, water, and social analytics and environmental data to predict in the next month how the pandemics is progressing in terms of incidents, hospitalizations, and UCI hospitalizations, and all these with the basics of advanced deep learning and other machine learning techniques. Last but not least, in the last slide, I will emphasize how important for us is the improvement of patient experience. We say that patient experience is the engine of the innovation in healthcare and in healthcare technologies. And that's why we have this Congress, the 6th edition, next end of September here in Barcelona, also with virtual access, so anybody of you can participate, where we will talk about the transformation of healthcare through the improvement of patient experience. Thank you very much, and happy to participate in the next question and answer process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philippe. Great to hear some concrete examples of how we can bring together the different kinds of data that I referred to earlier, and see some deep dives into image analysis, sensors and data fusion, and putting that patient first, because ultimately that's really what it's about. So I really enjoyed that. Our next speaker is Dr. Yasmin Sarik, who's the head of digital ideation, scouting and product design at BIX, the Boehringer Ingelheim Digital Lab. His work focuses on developing early ideas into digital products and digital strategy, and building minimum viable products and pilots, proof of concepts, scouting, digital transformation, and user-centered design. Those users again, our patients. Yasmin has a scientific track record with a number of publications and acts as an active speaker at conferences and workshops. And we have a connection going back quite a long way with our common work in natural language processing in the health arena. Over to you, Yasmin.
Thank you, Karin. Thank you for the very nice introduction. I can basically tie back to the speaker before. Everything we do is user-centric, right? So the patient, in this case, is in the middle of everything, and this is where everything starts. So who are we? I'm working for BIX. BIX is the digital lab of Boehringer Ingelheim, and Boehringer Ingelheim is a pharmaceutical company from Germany, which is privately owned. Let me start on the next slide with introducing who we are. We have been founded in 2017. We have currently more than 65 digital talents from over 20 nations at 2 locations. One is in Ingelheim and one is in Shanghai. The Shanghai office has been recently opened in the middle of last year. So we are basically building digital products at both sites. And every day we develop solutions for patients, customers, and users around the world. We don't do this only for patients, we also do this internally facing in terms of gaining more efficiencies, establishing new processes, and. So what we do, you can see on the next slide. This is basically, we develop disruptive digital products with the overall goal to save and improve lives. We also find the right trends and partners for digital disruption in healthcare, which means we scout for solutions on the market. So one piece is build, the other piece is partner, invest in startups, tech calls, whatever makes sense in this context. And by these 2 means, we drive the digital transformation of Boehringer Ingelheim as a pharmaceutical company. If we focus on the build part, how do we do that? On the slide that you can see next, you see we run this basically in 4 phases. All of these phases are time boxed. The phases are, number 1, ideation, where we work out a concept. We always do this together with our colleagues in the business. We basically develop a pitch deck, try to explain what is the problem. So we're in deep love with the problems that we face. And try to generate and propose solutions for that. We also assess the competitive market and then try to get a business decision to move into what is called the MVP, the minimum viable product phase, which usually runs 3 to 5 months. And we apply basically build, measure, learn concepts. We try to validate or disprove a key hypothesis that would give us enough confidence to move on in the next phase. The next phase usually is the pilot phase, which is around 6 months, and where we test it out, where we try to broaden the usage, get more users on our first application, on our first service, and grow the confidence in the digital product. And then we usually hand over the digital product into IT, which does the rollout, makes it bigger, tries to increase the usage, and throughout the entire phase or throughout the entire project or initiative, the business is always in lead, driving our initiatives. So I have brought 2 short examples to show to you. One is pathologic speech processing. PSP is basically a detection system that spots early signals and signs of Alzheimer through speech recognition. So the user is presented with a series of tasks that he or she has to describe verbally, and based on the analysis of the speech, the system can give an indication about whether about the probability of you having Alzheimer or not. The first results have been very promising, and one application that we think of is to use this as part of clinical trials in the CNS area to, for example, monitor disease progression. The other example that I've brought is from a different area. Boehringer Ingelheim is not only active in human pharma, but also in animal health area. In fact, pretty prominent there. And one solution that we have built already in the very beginning of BIX is PetPro Connect, which is meanwhile a spin-off called Pavru, P-A-W-R-U. You can look it up on the web. And it's an application that connects pet owners and veterinarians. the basic idea is to provide better, more convenient healthcare for animals that you have at home, for your pets, by being able to digitally manage appointments, by teleconferencing, so that you don't have each and every time to put your cat in a box and carry it to the doctor. There is also things like couponing and vouchering that run through this environment. So it is basically establishing a much closer relationship between the pet owner and the veterinarian, so that you have a much more convenient life when it comes to healthcare. These have been just two examples. There are way more. You can look it up on our website, gx-digital.com, and feel free also to reach out to me for any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. That was really exciting. I really appreciated learning about the process that you use there to transform your ideas into reality. It's really important to take those ideas and get them out there and get them in front of users and make that impact. So it's really great to hear what you've been doing there. I'd next like to introduce you to Dr. Rosaline Sankey. She's the lead product manager for Reaxis. In her current role, Rosaline is developing information solutions that help researchers to effectively innovate, particularly in the field of drug discovery and development. Before joining Elsevier, Rosaline obtained a PhD in chemistry at the University of Bristol and has held research scientist positions at AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and a leading UK drug discovery CRO called Signature Discovery. She's here to tell us about her work on information management in the chemical domain. Over to you, Rosalind.
Thanks, Karin, and thanks for having us here today. So I want to talk to you from a slightly different perspective today, and really in the foundational elements of how do we digitalize knowledge so that we can speed up elements of drug discovery and therefore better patient outcomes. So we all know that we all drown in content and knowledge, and this comes from several sources. We can think about that from in-house sources. We can also think about that from published knowledge. This is growing at an exponential speed year over year, and it's very hard to keep on top of. So how do we make that information more discoverable and also drive more actionable decisions from all of this content when it's so hard to keep on top of? So the next element that we need to consider is how do we build connections, how do we extract that content, and how do we connect it? So traditionally, this has been done very much in a manual way, but obviously this has limitations in terms of the number of people that can do this and the speed and also the capacity which humans can process knowledge. So where we're seeing a huge shift in the industry is to move towards more automated knowledge, where we look to apply advanced technology to do this in a much more expedient and expansive way. And then when we move to the next phase, what we can do is we use this foundational extraction and connection of knowledge to build products and services. So we think about the discoverability of that knowledge. This is where we and others create products, applications, databases, platforms. You can think the list is endless there, so that scientists and researchers and healthcare professionals can access all of that content and knowledge in an actionable way. So then that's the key point. And then if we move on to the next phase, is how do we drive better actionable and information in a more usable way to help researchers make faster and more informed decisions based on the information available to them, but also innovate ideas and generate and validate those ideas as well. But significantly, and pretty much the topic of this discussion, is how do we explore the unknown by connecting that data and that knowledge, but using advanced technologies such as AI and machine learning. There's a couple of words of caution I want to use here, because when we think about the lightning pace of this field and how it's accelerating, there's two key factors I really want to bring, and I think really great for a discussion topic here later on, maybe in the Q&A, is how do we, firstly, we hear a lot of hype and information around that. So in that bottom right corner around that outcome-driven AI, all the attention in the media ends up here. But what we must do as a community is not forget that the AI and the innovation we build there is absolutely nothing without connecting and extracting data. That's really the foundation of everything. If you don't have AI and machine learning ready data, your algorithms are not going to be any good. And you're not going to drive good outcomes. And secondly, the other area that I'm personally quite cautious about is the fact that we know that patient outcomes and healthcare outcomes vary massively based on race, gender, social and environmental factors. And as a community, I think we have to be very cautious about the way that we make sure that we collect representative data. We keep it in a deaggregated fashion so that when we're building AI models to drive better healthcare outcomes, they're doing it in a representative way. We have an opportunity here to remove bias and inequality from healthcare through advanced technology. The trouble is, if we don't collect representative data, we're actually going to exacerbate the inequalities in our healthcare systems. So those are my 2 closing remarks. And Karin, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a really fantastic point, and maybe we can explore that a little bit more in the Q&A. You're exactly right. We need to be really careful about how we collect the data, making sure that it is representative, and then being careful about how we use it to drive the models we build. I also liked how you talked about making knowledge actionable. And that was something I tried to mention as well in the context of this kind of virtuous cycle between data and information and knowledge. And it is really how we progress in science and in our ability to improve the solutions we come up with is by making knowledge actionable. So really, really interesting presentation. Thank you. We're now going to hear from the last speaker before we move to our Q&A and panel discussion. This speaker is Wolfgang Trautwein, who has more than 30 years of professional experience in the fields of business development and project management in the research and diagnostic market for life sciences applications. He works at Festo, where he's the business development manager in Life Tech and the global key account manager for Thermo Fisher and an ambassador of Life Tech at Festo USA. Over to you, Wolfgang.
Okay, thank you very much for the nice introduction and listening to all the presentations. The last one is a little bit outside the scope what you have heard today. We talk about digitalization at Festo. That means on the one hand side, how is Festo living digitalization in their manufacturing? And on the other hand side, when we look for selling the capability of this technology to our partners and end users in the market, that's where I want to summarize in this short period of time, because I can extend that talk for nearly an hour to go in more details, but we have to see it as an open field because different company, we have heard Boehringer Ingelheim, pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, industrial companies, they're having all the same requests when they talk about digitalization. In an early stage, when Festo was building their new manufacturing place in the Stuttgart area near the headquarters, we started 2013 till 2014 with the ideas of bringing digitalization to life inside the new Festo manufacturing place, which now, as it is real life, it is a teaching factory. We're getting a lot of visitors to see how we have translated the requirements from digitalization into real life. So our former executive director of the board in Germany, Dr. Veit, was just maybe some of the people have heard when they talk about Industry 4.0. He was the Minister for Foreign Affairs for Industry 4.0, used by our Chancellor Angela Merkel. And so he left Festo due to the fact that he was taking that role and bringing the information of an expertise of Industry 4.0 to the outside world of Germany. Next slide, please. We started, as we're saying, the topic is smart factory. And here, this is, let's say, the prospect which the industry had since the Industrial Revolution. And this combines all the things which we have heard in the topics that we say, okay, production systems together with artificial intelligence as a goal to manage this information. We have a great software team behind who building this algorithm that we can collect information from our production lines, that we learn how to maintain systems, how to overcome problems with the system. So that makes a system that helps our manufacturing place to be very efficient. And on the other hand side, when we're looking what is also requesting, we produce a lot of things inside here, side effects from the production, like for example, heat, which is coming from the machine. We're doing this energy safety testing with our production lines, as well as using the available products which coming out from the production, that we say, okay, can we use this like heat for reheating the building, or do we meet the environmental criteria? So Festo, with the way how we optimize continuously, the way in Germany as well as now in Asia and in other regions where we produce the Festo components, we have the same profile, and Festo wants to go green and meet the let's say environmental criteria, which is up in Europe and everywhere on the world to save our environment. Next slide, please. And here now, as we have the experience of the introduction done and realized how we have to automate our production, the same is that the people who want to use their, let's say, processes more automated and with the future of being more digitalized as they are currently are, they have to reconsider a lot of things which are running in the lab. And we have heard in the talks before that a lot of processes, either still manual or semi-automatic, new things with all these omics which are currently coming. Let's say pharmaceutical companies are undergoing in the moment this kind of paradigm shift. They're doing animal testing versus cell-based assays. So introduction of new things are coming. And Festo is challenged to build, let's say, not only components which doing liquid handling, sample handling, providing subsystems with the intelligence in the module that laboratories can build up their automated solution with off-the-shelf available instrumentation plus customized modules. And we supporting these integrators, which are mainly then also focused on the process management level, that their strength is the software part, and integrating all those customized solutions, which we know from high throughput screening, combinatorial chemistry, biomolecular screening, and all these omics parameters and new technologies which are coming to the market, like third generation sequencing, image analysis, mass spectrometry, and these instruments also providing a lot of data which needs to be handled. And so therefore we also focusing how the standardization of interfacing is there. Maybe you have heard about CELA and Animal. These are standard formats that you can communicate on the one hand side with instruments, giving the end users the flexibility to select the right software, and on the other hand side, when the data are on the output, to have a standardized data transfer into the cloud and handling the data further up there. Next slide here, then a picture which is currently a setup where the people looking into it, all these things which we have heard about, cloud and setup. Here some important things that when you talk about the LIMS connection, people, because of the complexity of data, also using a nice middleware software before they go on the process management level. And the downline, that's where Festo is helping to provide the right hardware setup, which is still the essential thing when analysis are done on the integration. As you can see, manual processes are still there. The people started thinking about what is the next step of automation in regards of sample preparation, sample handling, which analysis tools should be integrated, and finally, the complexity of data, how you do your analysis. So bioinformatics is getting is already a big tool inside the thing to also then further using the data which are analyzed, and bioinformatics developing algorithm also to predict maybe specific diseases. And so this is a kind of a circularization where it's important, as we coming from the Festo side, that the right hardware is there, and also the flexibility to incorporate new hardware inside such running systems, which could be islands as well as to open things. And we heard about this personalized medicine and personalized regenerative medicine is coming. So for us, we are challenged with 3D printing for personalized medication, as personalized cell printing in situ, and all these type of things where Festo tools and tools from third party providing for those people who have to use it for their purpose, solutions which can easily be integrated. So next slide, please, the final one. And so we are challenged with a lot of communication tools as well. Important for us is that whatever is on the hardware side is capable to open the gateway to the cloud, to start defining the Internet of Things. How do the dashboards look like? What is necessary for maintenance and service, and to pick all the let's say the process data which coming from the system, to have a log file depending on what is the purpose, like quality control in pharmaceutical companies. We have set it up, and totally other things. So for us, we have to see it as an open architecture, and with the Festo tools which we can provide on the laboratory level, to provide the customer the flexibility to build their own solution and combine it with ready to use instrumentation and technology. And on the other hand side, we are not limited to, let's say, electric automation. We coming from the pneumatic side, so even our part of liquid handling is pressure over liquid, so we can integrate and make the requirements according to the specification of our customers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang. That was a really great overview of the work that Festo is doing. And I think it's a good reminder that, you know, when people like me who work on the data side of things talk about data, that data has to come from somewhere. And a lot of the times the data comes from labs which are generating data, and which themselves have their own kind of operational efficiencies and analytics tools that they require. And the role of IoT in that is clear and really exciting, and really lays the foundation for the more analytical and AI tools to come to play. So with that, I think we'll move to our panel discussion. Thank you to all the speakers for their overviews, but we've had a number of questions come through from the audience, which we can now start discussing. And I'd like to encourage you to ask questions along the way. If you haven't already posed a question, we'll do our best to try to get it to as many as we can. I would like to start with a question that relates to the challenges in co-creation of patient-centric delivery models of care in the traditional kind of healthcare industry, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, insurers, and so on. The question that has been asked here is, how do we change the DNA of these traditional healthcare organizations to become early adopters of the kinds of technologies that we've been discussing and introduced to today? Maybe I'll start with you, Wolfgang, because you've been working on this right for many years, trying to get technology into these organizations. Do you have a comment on how we can get organizations to be open to to change, to this transformation that we've been talking about?
We are, on the one hand side, when you look at the industry side, they are more advanced already in regards of digitalization for their production facilities. On the other hand side, when we look at the idea and the people talking about digitalization, you join different webinars and you are sometimes surprised where the people starting yet. There are different levels which they have already reached, but finally is for me, I've grown up with the ELISA technology, from a very manual step to a fully automated sample in, result out, and all these features which we have talking about, positive identification of results and all these things which are currently the basic for digitalization. That means patient information. We heard a lot of these things, but also bringing the intelligence into solution, not only in pharmaceutical or in production, but also for the clinical lab. Now we have, one of my pictures was showing the circularization from limbs down to the analysis system, for the lab level. And on the other hand side, the outcome of the data and the data handling and how should the data be performed. And then we have these laws in place. What can you use? What is allowed to share in statistics or for learning or putting into new algorithms that you can also predict diseases, as we have heard, is one of the topics which should come out from results of a lot of studies and testing. So for me, this is always a mix when we get, let's say, contacted by diagnostic companies and they want to automate one of the latest application, which is going into more into the molecular. Now, when you look at the classical diagnostic, the clinical chemistry or the serological approaches, virus, we have in the moment, COVID is one of the topics where we have been involved a lot in automate the sample tubes, the containers, for saliva and as well for the different swabs, because it was a real workload. And then also when you start with the tube, you have the patient information and you have to trace that through the whole process. If you finally have a real-time PCR assay giving you an infection, yes or no, or even a quantitative result, how great is the infection or how high is the infection, as well as the fast test, so that you are not mixing up, let's say also when you do the fast test, the trays which are sitting on the table, that the barcode is the leading thing. And these are the basic things where we looking into it and learning what are the new consumables where you take patient samples. For example, when we looked into HPV diagnosis, big issue now everywhere in the world, and in the US the market now is open and there is a run to do this HPV testing. But when you look at the information, the containers where the swab is taken from the cervix, it's not so easy to handle all that stuff. So the challenging of engineering together with the data and the performance criteria that the customer or the end user is happy, and then the FDA regulations and stuff like this. This is something which is a circle where we have to live with, even if we're coming from the engineering side. Now we have to learn to understand the total process, which is necessary that you have a product which could be used for diagnostics, for example, and specifically the personalized medicine where diagnosis is also a point, and we heard that in the talks, for therapeutic approaches based on cells or based on antibodies.
Great, thank you. There's a very complex interplay to be had between all of these different elements, and you're right. Sometimes the way that we get change is by seeing that it works, and then by having a quality control process around it, and making sure that it's safe and effective. Which actually brings us to one of the next questions that came through. This one is a question from Katie M, and she targets this one specifically at Yasmin, but it builds on that discussion we were just having. Her question is, for early proof of concept ideation, how do you verify the correctness of the result? She points out that it can happen that an outcome can change once you generalize something or take something to a larger population. Yasmin?
Yeah, thanks for this very good question. How do we verify correctness? So, I mean, there is, of course, a technical aspect to it. I think we have heard quite some aspects already on that piece, and I would not say it's a totally safe bet, but it is a straightforward process, right? But really, when it comes to the service itself, how do we verify that the service targets the right audience, for example, that it really touches a problem and solves it for, let's say, a patient, a pet owner, or somebody working at Boehringer Ingelheim? And this is tying back now to what I said before. Everything we do is user-centric. So the user is really the key driver in everything we do. And this is what we understand by agility. So the agile process is following the users. It's doing user research, it's understanding what the users want, it's generating inferences from that, concepts that we again visualize and bring back to the users and test again before we implement something. And this is what gives us guidance, right? This is sometimes also a tough game, because it is not like a classical IT project where you define requirements and then you implement, but you leave it really to the users what the final result will look like. And maybe also what is one important thing is that it's important to drive external facing and internal facing initiatives, to not have too much a gap between what is done internally and what is done externally, to also generate a joint understanding, to a joint view on what digitization can bring. Yes, and you have always to be open to fail, right? At some point, you might just come up with a hypothesis and falsify it and say, okay, we have now to go back, right? And then you have two options. Either you have learned something and you can pivot the idea, which means go back, redo the MVP with a new hypothesis, or you say, okay, it just didn't work out. We had the wrong assumptions and the users told us different. Yeah, that much.
That's a really good point. And yeah, I think you're right. We shouldn't be afraid to fail. That kind of goes along with innovation, right? If we're not willing to take risks and try new things, then we're always going to be doing the same things. And it's a matter of doing that in a safe environment, which again kind of connects to some of the comments that Wolfgang has made around regulation. We need to be cautious in how we proceed, but that shouldn't prevent us from proceeding. That's great. Maybe connected to that, Rosalind, there was a question that came through about how drug discovery ideas can be verified and validated. And so this comes back to that question of efficacy. The questioner states there might be cases where two contradicting ideas are extracted in a drug discovery process. How can we address such cases? Rosalind?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a couple of answers to this. I think firstly, the way that we use automated extraction of knowledge is you rely a lot on the scale. So the chance that you'd have two individually conflicting data points is probably quite small. So you kind of rely on the volume to kind of address those inconsistencies. So that partly answers that. But the other perspective you could look at it and shouldn't be ignored is that sometimes when you have outlier data points, people often disregard them, but they can also be used seen as your biggest opportunities. So sometimes outliers are not to just be disregarded, but it is a challenge. And there's some other things that we use in terms of during automated extraction is not purely looking at the data point itself, but you look what's surrounding the information. So, and you can start to determine the relevancy and confidence you have in a piece of information based on not just, say, if you look in a paragraph of a patent or a paper, you might have a topic discussed, but you'll see what context it's surrounded by, and that can help weight the relevancy of information. So if you did have conflicting ideas, you may then rely on that kind of surrounding context to help guide you. But then a lot of this comes down to experimentation as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're right, the context is really important, and that's also part of that virtuous circle of leveraging the knowledge that we have to ground the new information, because we always want to put it in that framework of knowledge that we have, and that obviously it's increasing and changing, but it gives us grounding for interpreting and contextualizing the data. Great. Here's a question I'd like to pass to Felip. The talks all mentioned that the digital health product created needs to improve patient health outcomes, and that is one of our key objectives in a lot of this work. So how do you implement and trial a new innovation to be able to show that it will improve those health outcomes, especially in the context of a risk-averse health system that treats black box technologies with suspicion? Felip, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, and very interesting. It clearly there's a resistance to change, an inertia. We've seen in most of our initiatives, in our projects, that patients usually are more open to embrace changes and the digitalization and these new technologies, often more than professionals and decision makers, and maybe that makes sense. But definitely we need to create evidence, about the benefits of this, and the improvement of patient health outcomes is definitely one of the main evidence that we need. It's not the only one, because there are shorter term evidence, like for example the improvement of patient to the adherence to treatment, that is let's say shorter to demonstrate to evidence than health outcomes. But anyway, of course, patient health outcomes, it's of major importance, and well, that needs, of course, longer term studies to demonstrate that well, we are reducing complications or mortality or improving prognosis. Well, the ideal way is the traditional way, with solid clinical studies, like the ones that have been used for years for example, in drug development. That's something that we are doing now with digital technologies, and more evidence is created. I would like to complement with the idea of this black box. Of course, AI tools sometimes come in the form of a black box, especially when, for example, working with deep learning techniques. But there's a field that is flourishing more and more, which is explainable AI. So methodologies that allow to explain and assess the end user, in this case, for example, the healthcare professional, about the output, the recommendation, or the decision support that we are providing. So the combination of explainable AI and ethical AI, which is also a flourishing domain, will help in the acceptance of those technologies that are here to stay, definitely.
Yeah, fantastic. No, explainability is a key issue, and I think you're right. Kind of making those black boxes a little more transparent will help with that. There's a flip side of this, which is a question that has also come through, which we'll quickly address. So I'll pass this one to Rosaline. The question came through about how the data scientists who are developing the AI algorithms may have a lack of knowledge of the healthcare practices and the context in which that medical knowledge is generated. And so this is sort of the converse of the black box not being interpretable to the clinicians. We have the data scientists who kind of see the healthcare system as a black box, maybe. So how does this affect our ability to do the kinds of exciting things that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I was just actually writing a reply in case we didn't get around to this one. It's something we're very conscious of, and although I don't think it's critical that data scientists understand in detail the domain or the expert area, it's very important for them to come along on the journey. So, for example, when I'm working with users and clients, I'll invite the data scientists along so they can see firsthand for themselves exactly the challenges that our researchers are trying to overcome, so then they can put their work in the context of that bigger picture. So although not needing to have the expertise, they can connect to the challenges and therefore come up with better ways of using data science to address those. So not necessarily about being an expert, but being involved in the journey and understanding the outcomes that you're driving for is critically important.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that co-design theme we've heard come up on several occasions, and I think you're precisely right. It's really that collaboration between all of the people who are involved. And Felip talked about participatory health, and I think we can't forget the role of the patient. And Yasmin also talked about that in terms of the kinds of applications they're building, really being about helping the people. And so we need to co-design involving the technologists, the patients, and the clinicians and the people who understand the kind of healthcare context in which this all occurs. This has been a really great discussion. I'm sorry that we haven't gotten to all of the questions, but we do need to wrap things up now. So I'd like to start by thanking all of our speakers. It was really great to hear from all of you today. And we'd like to also thank the audience for your questions and comments coming through in the question and answer. We couldn't have had a robust Q&A discussion without your questions, so really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank the RMIT Europe team for making today's event happen, and so thank you to Marta. And behind the scenes, we have Ines Crosas and Karin Matthews, and supporting the Q&A to be Sarwar from here at RMIT in Melbourne. So thank you to you all for helping us. I'd like to ask that you take a moment to share your feedback on today's webinar using a link that is posted in the Q&A box. And you can also express interest in following up with RMIT or any of the speakers you've heard from today, as well as register for an attendance certificate for joining today. So with that, thank you all once again to our speakers and to our audience and to everyone for joining us today. Thank you. Have a good evening or day, depending on where you are.